Do I call the name of people who are absent? I'd say absent.
We'll go like this for years. And then each one of us will say something, each shall say.
Hey guys, since we are recording it live, if you could gavel in and
Okay.
get the start, that'd be great.
Okay, I'm gonna call to order the September 24th Planning and Zoning Commission regular meeting. So tonight, there, as always, you can also call in on Zoom. The number is 1-719-359-4580. The webinar ID is 863-8274-0802. I don't think, there might be some people on there. Anyway, so let's do you continue on. Okay, let's do the roll call.
Commissioner Connerton? Here. Commissioner Sims?
Here.
Commissioner White? Commissioner Waller?
Here.
Commissioner Houghton? Commissioner Cowan?
Here.
Commissioner Sipperly? We
I think she might
do
be,
have quorum.
is Commissioner Sipperly, she's on my,
She's online.
Yeah, that was Richard.
okay. I mean, I have Carolyn Sipperly on my,
I have my mic turned on. accidentally.
oh, are you sitting in the right place?
Yep, she is.
Okay, it comes up Sipperly on my thing. Okay. Any conflicts of interest tonight from anyone?
No.
Okay, none. Okay, let's do the receipt of the minutes. I'll take a motion on the minutes. Matthew? Yeah, it comes up on,
All stuff.
yeah, just push yours. Okay. So when I just push them, Hannah, then do I? Okay, so there you go.
I move to approve the minutes from. Give me one moment here. August 27th.
Okay, minutes are approved and the names are all wonky on my thing. So by Commissioner Cowan, do I have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Okay. I have a second by Commissioner Cowan as well, and even though it's not by Matt, so, okay, any comments? Okay, we'll just take a verbal vote. Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. Okay, so the minutes are accepted. Okay, yeah, and Hannah, so the names are all wonky, like there's Carolyn. There's Matt, there's,
Cut that out and actually do a vote for it and see what's showing up. We might need to reseat the table if there's an error.
okay, so Amy comes on as Carolyn.
But I'm asking, can we do a vote on the minutes so that it shows up here what our names are?
Oh, okay. Very tricky.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure why it's showing up wrong on your side. Might have to switch you guys around. Okay, you guys can vote now.
See if,
Yeah, so we're sat in the wrong spot. As Carolyn Sipperly voted. I think it's backwards, because usually. Yeah. Amy, would you mind? Would you want me to go? Or do you want to?
I'm moving. Like musical chairs.
Brandon, I get to move?
Everyone else was correct.
Yeehaw.
No, I think.
I'm the only one.
Reagan, I.
Yep.
You guys have to switch.
Wait, where am I going?
Okay, you
Yeah,
guys need to switch.
I think it's just backwards.
No worries.
Oh, yeah. That's what it is. Yeah,
This is fun.
sorry about that.
Except not.
And then we'll revote just to make sure. Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
Keep you guys on your toes.
right. Just guessing.
okay, so just, I guess, is everyone ready to do a revote? So you didn't,
Yep, it's all set for you to go.
okay, a revote. Just make sure we're sitting in the right place.
Everything's good.
10-4. Okay. Okay, next, we have comments from citizens appearing on items not on the agenda. I see none, so we'll close that part and, excuse me. So new items, we have, first one is the strategic housing plan and housing goal update. How you doing?
Good evening, PNC. Good to see you all tonight. Give me just a second while I queue up presentation. Okay, looks like we're good. So the reason we're here tonight is to discuss the strategic housing plan update. And if you all remember back in time about a year ago, we brought this before you all. We took a recommendation from y'all to city council to adopt it, and we did that. And if you'll remember, part of our discussion that night when you all made your recommendation, one of you, I think it was Commissioner Waller, asked the question, how are we going to do all these things? You know, so we talked about all this good information, these strategies, these goals. You asked, how are we going to achieve all these things? And I think I probably gave a pretty vague answer to that. Well, we're here tonight to talk about how we are doing some of these things. And the requested yearly update that came from that meeting too, that's what this is, because it was about a year ago that we adopted it. So let's start with all the good news. Good news is that Garfield County, where we are, is #1 in the nation. It's not really good news because that list is about the most difficult counties in the nation to be a home buyer. So out of all the places, the expensive places you can think of in the country, like Miami, Manhattan, San Francisco, even our neighbors in Pitkin County, Garfield County has been ranked by NBC as the most difficult place to buy a home in the country. And so as you can imagine, that's not just about cost. We're not the most expensive place in the nation, but there's a lot of other factors that go into it. And so it was kind of interesting reporting that NBC did. We are obviously pretty expensive. And our plan update that we adopted last year shows that. So out of the 4,300 or so housing units that we have in the city, you know, apartments, single family homes, all in, about 38% of those are cost burdened, which means that more than a third of our households here in the city, those people pay more than 30% of their income on housing costs. And what that translates to is that we need about 1,346 new housing units to overcome the goals of the plan update and really make a dent in those in our need for housing. That was 1,346. That was in 2023. And the plan update did a forecast out 20 years. So to 2043, that number rises to 1,858. So here I'm showing the median single family costs for single family homes as well as for condos. This was accurate as of June. I like to check these things about twice a year. And it was showing that the median single family home sold for about $910,000 for the first half of this year, and the median condo sold for about $535,000. What I'm showing here is a shot from a tool that's offered by Chaffa. They have a housing affordability calculator. So if you plug in your family's income, if you have any monthly debt, how much down payment you can put down, the interest rate and the term, they will calculate for you what is affordable to you. So it'll tell you what you can afford, what your monthly payments will be, and all that, keeping your housing costs under 30%. So here's an example here where I plugged in a family that would earn 150% AMI here, which is about $153,000. Assumed a little bit of debt, assumed a down payment of $25,000, assumed an interest rate of 6%. And so we get around $504,000 as our budget in this exercise here. We'll go back and compare. And back again. As you'll see, the numbers don't match. And so that's why we talk about the housing crisis here. What we're also talking about when we're going back and forth between these slides is a gap, an affordability gap. That's what this plan update showed us. It also identified that this gap is increasing, as you can imagine. In 2015, that gap was about $93,000. By 2022, that was over $200,000. So it increased a lot, and it increased more than wages did. Again, these are why we talk about the housing crisis, these reasons. Plan update gave us some strategies for how to try to cope with these scary numbers. We talk about using vacant city-owned land to develop housing, and we are doing some of this. But this represents a unique opportunity to us because when you have land, you're kind of in the driver's seat. If you want to develop housing, that's one barrier and one cost that you're saving. We also talked a lot in the plan about the preservation of new housing, of affordable housing, because no matter, even if you own the land already, it's going to be expensive. So preservation is always a cheaper option when it's available. So that's why preservation was a major goal and a major strategy that we identified. Within the realm of preservation, we can talk about things like community land trusts, preserving the mobile home parks that we have, rental assistance to renters, rehabbing rental housing, and programs like home repairs or loans for those kinds of things. And then finally, we also talked about code changes to our zoning regulations. In general, the recommendations from the plan were to do things like position the city to be ready for public-private partnerships, which we are engaging in, to prioritize housing preservation because it's so much cheaper than it is to build new housing, to do things like code changes to allow more affordable housing, and to take stock of our financial position and plan for the future. And I did want to mention here at this point that we're doing some of these things by leveraging our money for grants. And I brought a grant with me today. His name is Kevin Reyes. He's our new housing development manager. We're going to keep him even after the grant expires, but the grant made it possible to hire Kevin. So I did actually want to go through some of these recommendations, these specific recommendations from the plan. If you'll pardon me reading from the screen a little bit then. The plan states, for vacant city-owned parcels, identify those that are the highest near-term priority for housing development and those that represent long-term land reserve for affordable housing. We have done that. We have a nice spreadsheet going. The city does own some land. Some of it's maybe appropriate for housing. Some of it's not, but we have that information at least. For parcels that are near-term priority, describe key characteristics and provide a summary of desired density, product type, affordability, and tenure of future residents. In addition, determine whether the development potential of these parcels is best achieved through a sale or a ground lease. We have kind of been doing that in the spreadsheet I alluded to. This is calling for a certain amount of detail that we don't necessarily have developed, but I gave it a kind of a neutral, we've done some work on this because we have some of that information. Establish an RFP framework with transparent evaluation criteria for the proposed housing developments. I'm saying that we've done a little bit of work on this because we do RFPs and we have done housing RFPs. There's room for improvement and we can still, learn from how to do better, but we have done some of that work. cultivate relationships with prospective developers and contractors to establish a pool of potential RFP respondents. That kind of soft work and work in the contacts. We haven't created, a specific Rolodex of contacts, but we do have an idea where we would go with that. Identify additional incentives that the city would be willing to provide for housing on the city-owned parcels identified for development, as these may be needed to attract developer interest. Maybe a little bit strong to say we've completed this. That's maybe more of an ongoing thing, but I think we have done some of that work, including with the density bonus code changes that we've talked about with you all. Prioritize preservation policy tools for near-term implementation. I marked that as a check mark because we do think that preservation is very important. So even if we haven't, for example, bought a mobile home park, this is something that we know that we need to work on.
I'm
not
looking,
specifically
I
mobile
I just have a question on.
Yeah.
So when you do a check mark, does that mean it's done or does that mean that it's works in process?
The idea was that it's done. And done might mean it's done and we may need to keep doing it in the future, kind of depending what it is. But that's the idea. And if there's no check mark or X, then that means that we've done some work on it.
You might be working on it, but, okay.
Recognize the potential for other preservation approaches to be implemented at a later date, including rental assistance, apartment acquisition fund, relocation assistance, and home repair loan program. Here's an example of one that we are actively working on. Are they done and the program, active? No, but we are actively developing some of these programs that are listed in that goal. Estimate the annual revenue potential for the recently passed 2C. We have done that, and we're happy to report that in the first year, it came right in the middle of where we projected it to be, 1.7 million. So that was good. Seek to leverage state funding sources for affordable housing, including funding recently allocated by the legislature and upcoming funding through Proposition 123. We are doing that.
Did you get?
No, I'm being heard.
Chair Waller,
Oh.
would you mind welcoming Commissioner Houghton?
How much money was that you said had been raised?
In the first year for the 2C fund, 1.7 million.
I said 7 million. I was like, could have
No.
something different.
Unfortunately, not that much.
I'm just gonna state it for the record that Commissioner Houghton is now being sat.
Okay.
Oh.
Hello, how you doing?
Andy.
And so Commissioner Houghton, what we're doing is going through some of the specific recommendations from the plan. Can say that we've checked off some of these. And then the last one I have here is to establish a 5-year plan that projects revenues from local sources, leverages those against potential state and federal sources, and provides a targeted estimate of resources. We have a plan that's a 3-year plan. That's close enough, maybe. It's something that we are working on. We have done this exercise and figuring out how much money we have and what we can do with that money. So that's why I gave it a check mark. I don't know if I need this last slide here, but I'm going to do it anyway. I might be preaching to the choir, but someone told me at one point that you have to preach to the choir to make them sing. So here I go. Why do we care about housing and affordable housing? Well, we know that for business staffing and growth, a house is where a job goes to sleep, and businesses need workers to operate at full capacity. They need workers who can arrive on time, even in adverse conditions, like when it's snowing or when the canyon's closed. And so that points to housing locally here in Glenwood. Financial stabilities for families. When you have housing that's affordable within your means, within your income, that means that you're not as likely to need any kind of public assistance. Any kind of financial emergency is hopefully going to be less severe. You'll also have the ability to hopefully remain in the same job and maybe move up in your job and have that sort of stability of employment that's good for people. If you're not commuting in from 30 minutes away, you're also probably creating fewer greenhouse gas emissions. If you live near where your job is, then you at least have the opportunity to work or ride a bike into work. And so you're taking cars off the road. For health outcomes can be better with stable housing as well. For one, there's one less source of stress in your life, when you have housing that's affordable to you, so that's a good thing. But you also have potentially more time to afford and cook healthier options for food, and have time and the money for things like gym memberships, you know, at the end of the month, as opposed to not having as much when the month is over. We also have better outcomes for our kids. When kids have stable housing, then they probably get to go to the same school, which means that they have improved attendance. They can go stay in the same school with their peer group throughout school. They have better educational outcomes generally. And one detail that I stole from Habitat for Humanity is that little things like having a consistent quiet space to do their homework. You know, you think if you go to the same counter space and do your homework each night and it doesn't change every 6 months, those kind of things can make a difference. So that's all I got for you guys. I have the spreadsheet up here that was included in your packet, and we can look at that some if you all would like. But otherwise, I'm happy to take any questions.
So one question I have, maybe this is for Hannah or maybe Watkins for you, but so we're just, I mean, this is a presentation to us to give a 1 year status of here's kind of where you're at. And so we're just having a conversation and just giving some feedback of ideas that we
right.
have. Is that's kind of the outcome?
It's informational only. Yep.
Okay. Commissioner Sims?
Watkins, you talked about the city-owned, land and developable, and some can be, other pieces can't. Have we done any sort of work to say, if we were to develop all of the land that we do own, what number of units we could bring in? How many units we could build? How many units could we provide? Have we done that?
Yeah, and I don't have the number for you,
Okay.
but we have looked at that. Yeah.
Okay,
Um,
I mean, I understand needs from the hip. Do we have any idea of what percentage of the shortfall that we have right now that we'd be able to address with just the city land?
Yeah, it would involve a lot of assumptions, and as you all know, it would involve all of these. Any project now
Yeah.
using city land would mean an election.
But assuming we didn't have to have an election regardless, if we could develop it all, how many units could we make? How many units could be built on city-owned land?
Have some parcels that are sizable, so that's good, but that's also kind of hard to estimate on the spot.
I'm not, maybe I don't need an answer. Maybe it's something that in the future we said, when, we do have that number, just a thought. Another question, sorry, go ahead.
So I was just gonna mention, we did a feasibility study 2018 of city-owned lands, and it did an analysis of what was feasibly developable, because we do have quite a few parcels that aren't. We have like tiny, like 5 square foot
That's yeah,
pieces.
understood.
And we have a conceptual idea of how much could possibly be there by
Yeah.
number.
Okay. I imagine it's pretty sizable, or
Depending on,
what
there was
the-
a lot of considerations that went into that, but we started with all city-owned land, which there's a large map, and I forget the exact number, something like 200 parcels, and then it came down to 38 after we took out all the ones that weren't feasible at all, and then we did a review on those 38 and came up with, I believe, 8 that were then possible for a housing development. Some of those parcels include things that are no longer available due to ballot measures and things such as the airport.
Right,
Airport is obviously a sizable city-owned parcel that is being used for the airport, so we wouldn't include that number.
which makes sense.
That's probably the largest parcel that we
Right.
own, so it might be a smaller number than you think.
And one thing I just like to piggyback on that, I know, in fact, I wrote down page 13 or 10 or whatever of the strategic plan. In fact, I'm looking at it, or the plan that you presented has for no public vote, 8th and Midland, Iddings property, Ballard, Raymond property, Confluence, Voglar. I mean, it lists, so you listed a bunch of those. And you have unit potential. Or that's on there from the consultant or whatever that did that. And I don't know if unit potential, like this one says, so, and it had no public vote and public vote.
So that is all out of date now.
Yes, so as I mentioned, that study was done feasibility study was done in 2018. So now any city-owned property, so all of those, if they were to be developed for housing, would require a public vote
Everyone.
after
Right.
the special election that happened in April.
Which,
Okay,
yeah, the
that's
smallest
right.
number is 5, and if it goes above 4.
So so,
Any city-owned land, it does not have a number on that.
Right.
Yeah.
but this was like the 2022 plan, right? So that was, and then 2023 is when ballot A,
I was actually.
or
this
whatever
year.
it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
So 2024.
Time
This year.
flies.
It's funny how you remember that.
Easy.
Okay, it's amazing. Okay. Okay.
Um,
Matthew, keep going.
When we were looking at the affordability gap, was that Garfield County or was that the city of Glenwood Springs data?
That was the city.
That was the city.
That may have used, there may have been some Garfield County numbers, with assumptions about the income,
Right?
but that was, you know.
In
based
terms
on-
of like the raw data to generate the purchase price and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
Okay. And I'm wondering, is there any sort of analysis on who was buying these properties that are at $900,000? Are these new arrivals into the valley that are buying new home stock, or are they buying existing pre-owned properties?
That's a good question. The plan doesn't address it. I could speculate, but I don't know that.
Is
for
there a
sure
way to
either.
get that data?
Whether that data exists or not, that's
Yeah.
the, you know, I've talked to realtors and everyone has, you know, kind of their ideas about it. The only kind of study that I've seen that addresses that systematically was done kind of early in the pandemic when Northwest Cog commissioned a study to kind of look region-wide about trends in the pandemic. And again, those were early days, but they found that actually there's the incidence of out-of-town buyers was less than was assumed at the time.
At the very beginning of the pandemic,
Yeah.
which is, I can understand that. You know,
Yeah. You know, we're talking like maybe fall of 2020 is when they gathered that data.
right, okay. I'm just kind of wondering is if that affordability gap is kind of deceiving. And that's why I'm asking the question. Because if it's people who are coming in and they're buying new stock and the retirees and they're coming into the valley, they didn't exist here beforehand. You know, their purchase power is greater than a lot of people that were directing our efforts to a large degree. Right?
Mhm.
I mean,
Yep.
I don't think that necessarily contributes to the affordability gap, though, as it's taking into account what people can afford here in Garfield County.
I don't mean
Obviously,
it's saying it's wrong. I'm
Yeah.
saying I think we need to think about it in that perspective as well. Is who is buying these houses that are $900,000? I mean, I know we go around, I'm just kind of trying to wrap my head around
gotcha.
who's buying houses, who's coming here into the valley versus who we're trying to address and the segment of the population that we're trying to assist or direct our efforts towards. That's all.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, I'll piggyback something on that. You know, I don't have any data, but we had a block party, a month ago.
You weren't
Where I
invited?
live up in, huh?
We weren't invited.
No, you weren't in my block. But it turned out it was a neighborhood party. It was like several houses, and I live up in River Oaks. This is where I live on Walls Avenue, and I've lived there 25 years, and it was, I'll bet a third of the people were young couples with kids. And, you know, I don't know, the houses are probably over $900,000 where they are, but I don't know how that comes in. And I mean, kind of to that point, and I don't know how you get that data, but it's baffling to me because we had, geez, a lot of young kids and of people that have been there a long time that have left. So anyway. Okay, Matthew, do you got? You're really not Joy. You need to sit right over here. You kind of look like her, but I'll get myself in trouble.
No, you don't.
No, you have to move over here.
My name is right here.
Yeah.
Yeah, trust me.
Yeah.
Musical chairs.
Don't ask.
Everything just got flipped.
You're late, okay.
Okay, Commissioner Cowan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. and Thank you, Watkins, for this synopsis. Really appreciate the distillation. It helped me kind of bring me back to what we talked about a year ago and all that work. So really appreciate that. Trying to wrap my head around kind of the RFP on these city-owned properties now with the restrictions on how they can be transferred or the additional things there. What does an RFP currently look like on those parcels? Is this something that, I guess I'll just leave it there and see what we
Yeah.
have.
So when we've done this in the past, it's a pretty lengthy document because we outline, we're looking for a developer, basically, someone to go into partnership with us. And so we want to see that they're qualified to do it, that they have experience, that they know what they're doing and won't kind of waste our time and waste money. And so part of it is making sure that we're getting good applicants for that we could partner with. And then we also need to give them information about what we're trying to do here to make sure that they are coming in, they know what they're applying for, and that they're committed to it. And so right now, everyone is a little bit different because every project is a little bit different. We have ones that we've done, and so that we would use again if we do this again. I think ballot A is the main difference in what we've done in the past and what we'll have to do in the future when we do this, because on the one hand, at least we know what they're getting into. There's no question if we're going to use city-owned land to build housing, there will be a general election. So developer, please program that into your time frame, and that'll be the expectation. That does make it harder for them, though. That does make the timeline for them to start receiving the rental income or whether it comes from a sale or rental. It puts it out a lot farther, and it makes the results of their work a lot less certain. So that's why ballot A is a barrier, not an insurmountable one, because we can still do things. One of the things that's been said about ballot A is that it will result in better results for the community, and I think there's some value in that. We have to make sure that everyone, or at least a majority of people, agree that it's good for us. But it's going to take a lot longer.
Commissioner Houghton.
I apologize if you already went over this before I got here. So please forgive me if that's the case. Are there any concerns about not meeting our Prop 123 commitments?
We think we're going to do it. Hannah, do you have the numbers off the top of your head? From some projects that came in 2023 or 2024, we have a certain number of them accounted for. We have one project that I mentioned, the Glenwood Gardens site. If it comes to fruition, that'll be another big bump in what we need to do. I think our commitment is something around 66 units over 2027, I think, or is it 2029? That's our 2026. So that's less time. It's a push. It's certainly a push to do it. We think we can do it.
So with some of the projects that have come through recently for funding from our Workforce Housing Advisory Board and City Council approvals, if those actually go through, then we will meet our requirement. One of those is a purchase of a rental project that is currently market rate, condominiumizing it and turning it into affordable for sale units. That's an 88 unit building. So in theory, I believe their AMI, their area median income rates for that project went up to 150. So not all of them would qualify, but it's an 88 unit building. So that would take care of most of our commitment. The Benedict Senior Housing LIHTC project, I believe, has 12 or 13 that would meet that. And then a couple others that have lower numbers. So we do believe we're on track to meet that commitment.
All right, thank you.
And if you have any questions about what the Workforce Housing Fund is doing, that's also the reason that I brought Kevin Reyes with us. So you can ask those questions to him.
Yeah, I thought the Workforce Housing Fund was great. I mean, that's probably one of the biggest successes. And I thought the plans that you had for that were very good of housing assistance and those sorts of things. I think that's and welcome for that, you know, I mean, that was a great, that was a wonderful thing. Well, I have a couple of questions. And maybe you had this and when you updated your plans, but you know, after ballot A passed, you know, public engagement is, and I know it's a huge amount of public engagement that went into the plan when it was done. And then ballot A still, you know, passed, I think resoundly, didn't it? It was like 60% or something. I forget what the percentage was, but so I guess what my question is it seems like that would be an ongoing strategy. Maybe it has little teeny checks because it needs to continue on every year to stay in touch with you know, the community on both educating of here's what we're seeing, here's the data that we see, here's what we view, and listening to what they're saying, because you know, we have all this city-owned property, and there's going to be a referendum on it. You know, you don't want to be surprised by any means, and I think education for people is just paramount, and it's not like there's us versus them. It's we're all one happy Glenwood family, you know, happy most of the time. But I mean, I think, and I don't know, was that one of the strategies to do, and maybe it's every year, there should be ongoing things, not just coming to us, but to the community, and you even kind of know, here's the people that spearheaded, you know, that program and all of that sort of thing to engage, you know, those people. Anyway, I'm just tossing that out as a question.
Yeah, well, it is something that we've thought about, and our housing commission has talked about some as just more general education about housing and not related to any specific ask or project that's upcoming. I think that probably is something that's wise that we could look into.
Yeah, because I think people question data, people question, you know, like the question Matt was asking, you know, I look in my neighborhood, you know, and I don't know what that is, and then it's, you know, 30%, which is what it's always been. It's always been that number. But now are people comfortable all over the country living at 50% or, you know, that sort of thing? So is 30% outdated? You know, I mean, I'm not arguing that, but I'm just kind of tossing that out there as those are probably perceptions within the community, you know, of how that went down. And I think it's paramount because, geez, we have some great properties in the city that could go that way. Okay, that was one question I had. Another one, so do we have any public-private partnerships lined up? Like with, I know CMC was talking about some things, and in fact, one of my projects was on here that I did, part of Mesa, but with, you know, Roaring Fork School District, and so are there any other in the works? P3s lined up?
The only one that we have right now on the books is ongoing, and you know about it. It's Habitat for Humanity.
That's a great one, by the way.
Yeah, so that's still going on, and we don't have anything that's right.
One thing that's not on the list of projects to be developed is our hotel conversions. So you could view those as a public-private partnership because it's, you know, RAFTA has one that they purchased, another was developed, the residences on Grand. And so those developers access some incentives from the city to convert existing hotel rooms into short-term and seasonal worker housing. So that's certainly something that's development neutral. It's not coming out of the ground. It already existed. That's been improved. And 35% of those projects are now restricted to 100% AMI for rental product. So that's also something that isn't reflected on that spreadsheet, but is a win in the affordable housing realm.
Yeah, that was a great term too. I'd never heard of development neutral till I read that, but it's a wonderful thing. Commissioner Cowan.
Thank you. Just a couple questions, but kind of spinning off that. These RFPs, do they envision a a severance. So transition of ownership from a municipality to a developer, or if we're talking context of public, private, is there opportunity or potential? Would it make sense for the city to maintain or retain ownership of a parcel, but perhaps be like a master lease or something like that?
The answer is yes. All of these options are possible. They all come with advantages and disadvantages. I don't know if I could speak in a lot of detail about the way all those things could work. But yes, I mean, keeping them under one ownership where people lease it is definitely possible. There's that cash flow that looks nice to developers that way too. They could be for sale model, and the city could maintain ownership of the ground under it is kind of one community land trust model. All these ways are possible.
Mhm. Thank you. The ADUs, you highlight in your memo, the what's coming out of the commission, the housing commission, and kind of a pre-approved ADU program. Kind of any expansion on that, and forgive me if this is already something we've discussed. I kind of get STRs and ADUs kind of all mixed together. But also the junior ADU and kind of really what that means in this context.
Sure. You're right on. We haven't talked about this with you all yet. I'll start with the pre-approved ADU program. It exists in a few places around the country, Eugene, Seattle, one in California that's not coming to me, Summit County, closer to home. And the idea is that it's also kind of a development neutral idea. It might be new construction coming out of the ground, but part of the theory with ADUs is that you're not changing the character of the neighborhood because it's a small new development. It's in the backyard. If it's small, there's not theoretically going to be very many people living in it. So the hope is that it doesn't change very much from the street and for your neighbors. So in that sense, it kind of is development neutral as well. We do have new ADUs, working on a couple right now. When we look back at what like the last 10 that have come to us for approval, for example, the majority have been within the existing footprint of the house, like a basement remodel, as opposed to building something new out in the backyard. We think the reason for that is just the cost of construction. So the cost being a barrier for building new ADUs. And if ADUs are kind of a development neutral option for creating more housing, also ADUs tend to be small. So the hope is that the rent is small compared to, a 1-bedroom apartment. This is one way that we can look at creating more housing. And if one of the barriers is the cost of construction, the cost of permitting and all that, that's what this idea of a program would hope to address. Because the result would be that if we do this program, that someone goes online, downloads their plans. This is the ADU I'm going to build. It's also already been approved by the building department. So you do have to do some work. You have to figure out where you're going to site it on the property. You may need to get a geotechnical report and that sort of thing. But we're cutting out some of the steps that come with it. And about the junior ADU concept, we don't really have plans of moving forward with that right now. It's something that's been piloted in California, I think kind of all over the state. And the idea being that it's an ADU that's kind of even smaller. And when we've tossed the idea around here in Glenwood, it would be the junior ADU would maybe have to be within the footprint of the home. That would be that basement remodel. But we could maybe allow that with something in the backyard, a more traditional ADU. Again, no firm plans for proposing this, but these are concepts that have been talked about a little bit.
I'm going to go back to my public-private partnership. I'm going to call this a P4. So when I, back when I was in the game, a lot of the engineering firms that I worked with, not very big, but housing was a huge issue for them to hire engineers and bring engineers in, like Sopris, SGM. And so do we reach out, and I'm kind of looking even in the back of it, but do we reach out to try to form partnerships. And kind of what I'm getting at, like, let's say Yancey, needs two places, SGM needs 3, and, it's similar kind of people. And they have money, would they, is that something that we look at trying to put together a partnership that's not just one organization, but multiple organizations?
Well, we're seeing some of that right now, not as a partnership with the city so much, but for example, with Habitat for Humanity and their projects, they do actively partner with employers who need housing for their employees. And so we're seeing that they come to the employers and they help them fill their funding gap that way.
Yeah, but I'm kind of talking about a different level of people, I think, but I don't know, maybe not, but I don't know, is that?
So one example of that is a project that we were thinking about pursuing across the street, actually, which is Vogler Park. And when we were looking at that RFP, we actually put it out as a partnership between several of the larger employers, I believe the school district and the hospital and the county. And so we were having discussions, putting it out there to see if there's interest from those individuals to partner on a project. So it is happening all the time. We don't have a formalized process for it necessarily, kind of project specific, but
Yeah, because it seems like collectively people might be able to afford more by putting money in. That's anyway. Okay, that was, let's see, one question I had was on the Workforce Housing Fund, which is awesome, holy moly, 1.7 million. So how many years is that in place? Is that
That is, I think, 20.
20?
It sunsets with, it'll
20
expire
years?
in 20 years and then would have to be renewed or it would go away.
So that's like a windfall. I mean, I don't know if that's the right term, but so is the projection that'll be around that, 1.5 to 2 million a year for 20 years?
That was the projection. I think we said either 2 or 2.5 million is our upward estimate. So it's obviously going to vary every year. It depends on the tourism economy. It's paid
Significant though.
by short-term tax on short-term rentals and on hotel rooms.
Okay, awesome. And then I don't know if this, so, I mean, I just hear this from the community. So as we build all these new apartments and we keep bringing more people in, there's 300 going up in the Meadows right now. And so how does that, and I don't know if it's a percentage or how this works out, but how does that change population for Glenwood? When 300 new units come in and let's say that's 2 people, there's 600 people. I mean, so does that play into your whole needs assessment and all that sort of thing as you look at the numbers?
Yes, possibly indirectly, but yes, it will, because the housing market, everything is related to another thing. There's obviously a lag. So, we're seeing these 300 units that are under construction and it'll be a while still before they have CO and are occupied. And even once they're occupied, there'll be a period of adjustment before the market kind of realizes what's the fair price, now that there's these other options available. And, whether it directly lowers the number of units that we need, that's a question of, since these are free market mostly, how much is the rent going to be? So if the rent's falling above 100%, then it would not.
Yeah.
But it would still help in that it would probably put downward pressure on other places that are expensive.
And I kind of recall, to like what Matt was getting at earlier, was, didn't we see a presentation from the Lofts a couple years ago that on the number of people that were there that worked in town? It was like, and they're probably 70%, not affordable and out of whack, but quite a lot of those people were working in the town as teachers and as, not any big high paying jobs. And I mean, was that data from the developer? Was that? Do you remember that?
Yeah, that was a developer presentation. I think they came in, they were saying just around 50% of
That's
the
significant.
building was people who worked in Glenwood Springs. We don't have that raw data to confirm, but yeah.
But that's kind
anecdotally.
of like what Matt was, I think, was asking about. I mean, so you're, in some ways, you're getting people living here that are working here, but but it's out of whack, that's the 30% kind of thing. So anyway. Okay. Does anyone else have any other? Thank you. This was great, by the way. I mean, thank you very much. So, hopefully we see you in another year.
Great. We have good news by that time.
More checks. Thank you very much. Watkins. Okay, next on the agenda is the Energy Climate Action Plan. Jim?
You'll give me a moment.
You guys like how you're getting all the information from a fire hose tonight?
The last one there's a lot in that one. That's right up your alley.
Not finding what I'm looking for in terms of sharing my screen.
Right here.
You'll have to join the.
Green chair.
I do have this one.
Thank you.
Stage fright.
Good evening. Jim Hardcastle, Long Range Principal Planner with the Community Development Department. I'm here to share with you this evening the year-plus long path that we took, the city took to come to and arrive at the adoption on August 15th of our Energy and Climate Action Plan, which was building upon what had been created in 2009. It's a municipal inventory only at this time, which could potentially reach out and have a greater effect on the community as we lead by example within our municipal buildings, our vehicles, our infrastructure and whatnot. I didn't bring any grants this evening, but I did bring a gift. I have Heather McGregor here with us, who probably doesn't need any introduction. She was instrumental in the creation of the 2009 Climate Action Plan and has been, I don't want to say with me, but I think if we're looking in terms of individuals, I think Heather and I probably spent on our end, not the consultants and the majority of the time in meetings, surveys, reviews, editing, and we wouldn't be here without her with us. Want to show some appreciation there. We were lucky to find two different consultants to work with us. One was Blue Strike, a nationally known environmental group who took the lead with an economist at the helm and an array of very knowledgeable and talented energy data collection individuals. Also pairing with Clear, a local entity which you're familiar with, who was a close runner-up to our selection for consultant. And as it turned out, it was a wise decision. I don't know who proposed it, to bring them both on board, have them work together with data collection, and ultimately they work together at every juncture and aspect on the project. A number of the goals of this project, which ultimately had to do with a reduction in energy consumption and savings and limiting greenhouse gas emissions, was, as I mentioned a moment ago, to build upon what had previously been adopted and pursued by the city in 2009. What you saw in your packet is ultimately a plan that did reach out and attempt to be somewhat ambitious and exploratory in terms of what it is that is being accomplished regionally, statewide, and nationally with other climate action plans, and to adopt and push forward those items that made sense with what it is that we have here in our relatively small city compared to some of those other jurisdictions. Obviously, looking at cost savings opportunities for the city, both short and long term. As I mentioned, it was a municipal wide inventory that we worked on again for the second time from 2009. But the idea is that we can do a wide range of measures that have an impact within our own infrastructure, our own government workings, buildings, and services that we offer. We all were able to put together a detailed and comprehensive implementation plan that has a number of goals, strategies, and action plans, or action items, sorry, that are very distinct and aligned with departments. And there wasn't something that was included in your plan, but it's an implementation guide that's meant more for internal use, that identifies departments, who is responsible, a start and an end date, cost savings, and then potentially places to go for funding for some of these initiatives. And aligning the updated ECAP with existing plans at the city, regional, and state levels, as I mentioned a moment ago, is key to making sure that we have goals that are aggressive but attainable. This emissions inventory is more focused on the right panel for importance here, as it takes out the emissions that are put forth by the landfill, which is currently undergoing a number of different studies to capture what it is that is necessary on their end to manage their emissions, and weren't necessarily part of this plan. It shows a total emissions of just over 3,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide emissions that are a result and a decrease from the idea that 2,100 metric tons are reduced based on our purchasing choices of electricity. And as we've been able to reach forward and be in charge of our own energy acquisition and consumption on our end, as opposed to paying exorbitant fees and making connections that just don't benefit the community. This right here shows that we've already been making wise choices, but this ultimately will help us reduce those even more. Throughout this entire process, which some have called about a year, I would say 16 months from the start of the RFP, the idea of what it is that we wanted to do, went through a number of different phases, which on a consistent basis every month resulted in a memo from our consultants, updating council along the way, meetings every 2 weeks with our operations team, sometimes stretching out to other strategic overarching groups that would be aware of what it is that we were doing internally within all the departments. A staff survey was put out in December with 21 responses that looked at a number of different items in terms of what employees saw or understood about energy consumption and savings and measures to help reduce our carbon footprint. 5 focus groups were held in January, 31 responses from various departments and community organizations. Doesn't really give light to the idea that 5 different focus group meetings happened, and anywhere from 7 to 11 individuals showed up and gave their opinions, ideas, and brainstormed a number of different support and growth ideas based around 5 different resource areas that I'll share with you in a minute. And then the steering committee involvement was very helpful in terms of the ECAP draft as we neared the end, with 3 different revision periods, which brought us to the end with our plan. Those 5 different framework groups: energy, buildings, transportation, waste management, and natural park systems, were identified as 5 different categories to help us determine and set up targets to reduce emissions within our municipal operations. We had looked at a scientific guideline that had supported the idea that we can reduce our emissions 60% by 2035 compared to a baseline of 2022, which would allow us to then reach out and come to a hopeful guide and goal of 50 or 100% by 2050. Again, these are all in line with Paris Agreement, global warming limiting measures to bring down warming 1.5 degrees centigrade every year above pre-industrial levels. Near the beginning, I'll just back up just a second there, the 2 consultant teams were able to visit the town, tour our facilities, and then take a look at quantitative and qualitative ideas and needs from stakeholder engagement activities as we push forward in the next couple of months. Best practices observed from regional peers and nationwide climate action leaders were essential in understanding what it is that we have, what we need, and how best to apply some of the strategies that were identified for us. Again, the surveys and the information that was brought forward and shared with staff was able to be thoughtfully considered with just a simple yes, no, and maybe extrapolation of what we thought might be practical, what was attainable, but at the same time, what was maybe a little bit more cutting edge, what was more daring. And then the final review by the steering committee gave us a plan that ultimately produced goals, strategies, and action plans, which, as you're more likely aware of from other projects that we've worked on before, the goal identifies the bigger overarching theme, the strategy gives more direction to it, and then the actions, as you see on the right side there, have the ability to be connected up with different departments and agencies within the city to manage that particular item. And there is an accountability that's built in to the overall project. Just for example, in this one, as you can see, the goal itself is reducing employee commute emissions. The strategy, creating and incentivizing opportunities for employees to use alternative transportation. Though that's a great direction, but until you get to the action, and the first one, installing new and covered bike racks at city facilities, those particular actions have a direct and profound impact collectively on the goals and strategies that are part of the plan. If you had a chance to look at it in your packet, it's quite extensive, and it has a lot of latitude for departments to work with other departments, interagencies, and to be able to reach out and bring some of those to a successful finish point. 2 others, and I won't go through those. Energy and buildings, those were just for you to look at. And then this is the implementation plan that I mentioned a moment ago, not something that will be produced and presented for public consumption, but it's merely an inventory tracker for us to be able to come back not only quarterly, but yearly, and share what it is that we have been doing, who is in charge, what successes have been had, where we need to or we might have to modify what it is that we're doing. And then ultimately giving some support to funding opportunities as well. The final report, as you've seen in your packet, is fairly extensive. It's visually appealing, it's clear, and it has had already an impact on how some organizations within the city, namely Parks and Rec and Public Works, are considering and thinking about how they do what they do, whether it's on a daily operational basis or with other special projects. Edits don't need to be talked about. I've mentioned that. And at this point, any other questions you might have, I'd be happy to entertain them with the support of Heather McCracken.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for that. I guess a question about chasing any external funding opportunities. Is that responsibility? Does that fall on the individual departments and that implementation plan, or is there like a climate coordinator or grant coordinator for the city?
Excellent question. We don't have a sustainability coordinator at this time. But the idea that one of our consultants most likely will continue with us in the future is a possibility to help us manage and look for those types of funding opportunities. Somebody here inside the city, not necessarily has been at the top of our list, just based on what it is that we all have assigned to us on a regular basis. But certainly that's a possibility.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm just gonna kind of follow up on that. So there's not an owner for the city for owning. I mean, first off, I'd like to commend you all. This is a great plan. I kind of did this at CMC for a while. But I mean, it's really good. I think it's very good. So, I mean, is there an owner? Because I know it's a lot of work and that whole thing. So I see
Sure.
Heather standing up here.
Sure, and I think I was probably focusing more on the money than anything else, but I think in terms of ownership and the action items, different agencies that have been assigned those particular focus points are responsible for action on them, moving forward, implementing, and then reporting back. I think and again, this hasn't been fully discussed, but I envision us all working as a team and reaching out to one another to actively look for those funding sources or support opportunities.
We
Are-
talked early on with city council
Um,
about,
Why don't you talk into the microphone, Heather?
okay, Heather McGregor. We talked early on when we were, way back when we were putting the RFP together for the consultants about the concept of, would we be aiming for the city to have a specific single employee or department that would be a sustainability department versus having the assignments spread out in all departments? And Shelley really guided us on that and urged us to just not create a siloed position, but have climate responsibilities be spread in every department so that everyone is responsible for making a difference on this front because it is so universal.
Yep. Okay.
So I'll just add one other thing. Jim's presentation mentioned stakeholders. And in this case, that's kind of a vague term, but for this project, the stakeholders were the city's department heads who are, responsible for public works, parks and recs, utilities, facilities, fleets. So it's the people who are actually working for the city who have the ability to implement these changes, they have the authority to do that. And so then they were the folks kind of giving us the reality checks as we went through the process. But then they will be the owners.
Commissioner Connerton?
Thank you. I haven't said much tonight, but I was gonna ask you about this, like who is involved as stakeholders. You just answered that question. Thank you. But also, I do think it's great that collectively you're all going to try to work together as a team and then, bring this back. But I mean, just I see like some things maybe being missed or not pushed forward because there is no quarterback for the team who's, maybe directing the play. Yes, you all know what you're supposed to do, but it would be nice, I think, if you guys were forward thinking, "Hi, okay, is this going to be sustainable? Do we need somebody to be the point person or just to be the director of all these different departments and things that everyone's doing?" It's just more of a comment. It's not necessarily a question because, I mean, collectively, yes, you can all be responsible, but at the end of the day, it's like if somebody has a thought, yeah, they're just gonna maybe ruminate on it on their own. But it seems like there should be someone who is quarterbacking it.
And I'll just kind of piggyback on that. And I guess, and it doesn't need to be a sustainability person or whatever, but is there, so, I mean, who did the presentation? I guess someone has to put, be the,
The quarterback.
yeah, that just says, okay,
Of the
we're
team.
meeting in 6 months or, and that's kind of the question. It doesn't mean it's a paid position because we know you get paid too much money already, James.
No,
Or
I
not.
mean, this is a good question because there are so many municipalities out there that have sustainability coordinators. It's a
Yes.
dedicated position. And they interact with all of the different agencies for sure. At this time, we don't have that in our sites, but we do have quarterly and yearly management of the action items by the directors of all these different departments, responding back to the city manager. Now, with that being said, we are looking at, and this was part of the approval process, is that there is a review period, a quarterly, and then a yearly report back on where we're at. What have we attained? Where do we need to go from here? So it's not a static plan for the next 10 to 15 years. It will be evaluated yearly.
And I'm kind of hammering on it just a little bit, but because Clear is here. I mean, in fact, that's who I worked with all the time was Clear. But so are they the continuing local person and blue tick or whomever? Blue tack. or-
What?
Taco, what was the taco?
Blue
No,
Strike,
no.
Blue Strike is out of the picture at this
Yeah, well,
point.
so that's kind of my question is because data's a huge deal. So.
Okay, you're bringing up several different things.
No, I
So,
know, but
Blue Strike did, or was to have done a training program with someone on city staff with, ICLEI's ClearPath tool for tracking energy use data. I don't know if that's actually happened yet.
It has not happened because we haven't actually made a selection on who we'll be moving forward with in terms of the management of the program.
Yeah, and then Clear would continue hopefully to work with the city, but their programs are going to be more community faced. So they were lockstep with us as we walked through this plan. They were at every meeting, and they will be also participating on building energy data going forward. Gathering that utility data for the buildings and facilities.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna hammer it just a little more, but I do think, so Clear is a consultant and they're community faced and the city's paying them, right? And so if we're going to disperse this through all the departments, through all the municipalities, it seems like to have one expert or a expert who can be the person who can manage the energy output, input, flow, make suggestions, just having more, I'm sorry, and I hope I'm not insulting you by saying we need an expert on our staff because maybe you are, but, I just feel like it would be, if you're putting all this time, this effort, you have two consulting firms who are working together to come up with all this. It would be great to maybe internalize it a little bit more and have that responsibility in-house as well. So I don't know, that's just.
Yeah, well, that'll be a decision for council to make in the budgeting process and to see how overloaded department heads get with trying to implement this as well as everything else that they are responsible for. So we specifically put that annual review as a goal in the plan, and that happens in the spring. So that the idea is that is completed by early June,
June 15th.
so that it's in time for the budgeting process for the following year. And so that whole idea of making it a living document that can be, added to new projects, added new action steps, or saying, oh, this just did not work. We've got to change it out for something different. Or maybe look at staffing levels that are needed to help support the existing department heads and their people to make all this come together.
I'll jump in there just on, since many of you have mentioned this, and I appreciate that I'm hearing a strong encouragement that you guys think a champion is necessary for this. It is not currently in our staffing budget, and so as Heather rightfully pointed out, it wouldn't be something that we would be looking at until we actually see how the program is going. And we do have multiple plans, because we do a lot of plans in the city that are managed by existing staff. The strategic housing plan, you've got Watkins and Kevin that are working on that, though that is not their specific job. There's a lot of other ones that I could point to, but we don't necessarily get to add a full-time staff all the time. But noted, and several other jurisdictions that do have sustainability coordinators tend to be not just an internal focus that this plan is, because this is only for city operations. It's not external. It's not other municipalities. It's simply Glenwood Springs. Sustainability coordinators tend to have an outward focus and an inward focus. So there may come a time that we identify that really is necessary to continue this particular plan. But at this time, we're doing the best that we can.
And I wasn't necessarily promoting hiring a sustain. I was not. She was, but I was not. I mean, I'm assuming that the city's still part of the GC still exists and that whole thing, so.
It is important, and it's always something that we consider when we have plans. We never want to have a plan that sits on a shelf and doesn't get implemented. It's not the best use of our time or the funding that went into it.
Well, the
so.
plan looks great.
Noted.
Really, the plan is awesome. Okay, Commissioner Houghton.
Well, first of all, I think it's a great plan to start. I did public comment at this for city council, for the record. I don't know if that matters. So I guess while you're here, I'll ask one of the questions I had in city council was housing availability, that kind of thing taken into consideration when talking about employee commute times, or commute emissions, right? That's a quarter of our pie. That's something that the city does have some control over. Was that part of the scope?
No. We felt like we could not do everything. And, the climate problem is everywhere all at once. And we specifically drew some lines around this plan to make it municipal operations. There's a few action steps in there that are community facing. But we did not attempt to look at where city employees live, or we just looked at their commute. The gasoline that they use for their personal vehicles or van pool, carpool, bus passes. There's some incentive action steps in there to help folks, say, ride the hogback if they live in Newcastle. But we didn't look at housing stock per se. No. That would have been a really big add-on to our work.
Yeah, I guess I understand that, but that's also something that the city has some control over, and it's politically unpopular. I understand that currently in this climate. But I think merits consideration as the plan is implemented. I think it's something that is potentially good, quite literally bang for the buck, right? I mean, amendments to our own code cost very little and could potentially reap outsized rewards. Thank you.
I have a couple other comments. So one is, I think truly, I think it's good. And I like that the department heads, have, it's within their own thing. And I know this is budget season kind of thing. So I'm assuming that, my question was about funding, but I'm assuming that this is just another strategy in all of the stuff that they're doing. So the strategies, if you're facilities doing the buildings, or if you're, public works and you're doing physical plan, whatever kind of stuff that all gets boiled up, and then that's what goes to Boyd and things get cut or get put in. But that's kind of the funding process, and this is just part of the whole pie, one part of the whole pie. Is that?
I would also mention, I think I've mentioned the organization that we partner with for grant funding. So we do have a consultant, Sustainable Strategies, and they work with all of our departments and keep an eye out for grant opportunities. And this plan will be no different. They're aware that we brought this through. And so goals and policies that we've identified in a lot of our plans, they keep an eye out for granting opportunities and help us apply for those, and do a little bit of lobbying on our behalf. So they support us a lot in finding additional leveraged funding opportunities to carry out some of the policies that we see in these plans, maybe a little faster than the city could do on its own.
Good. And then I have one it's kind of a private one, but I saw it in strategies on page 23 or somewhere in there. So I kind of glanced through the plan, but was or it's page 50, I guess. But I saw that recycling is going to be mandatory for commercial properties. And I know when we went with waste management, it was just residential properties that, or whomever our trash picker up or doodad people are, but that was for, what was it? Maybe 4 less, if you had 4 less units, there was some number, whatever, six was the number. And so I happen to have one that's 9. And so how does that become, how does the mandatory thing kind of work for people that have, you have a dumpster enclosure in your alley, you have X amount of space, and so do people have to spend a lot of money and make new stuff, or how does that roll out to the board community?
Well, we did not attempt to dictate the logistics of that, but your solid waste manager, Liz Morrow, was a major contributor to the action steps in this plan. So, and she, would have had veto power if we'd thrown something in there that she thought was crazy and unrealistic. So she is telling us that these are the things that need to happen in order for our future, the landfill is got legacy emissions
Yeah,
from.
I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just talking about the logistics of how does that
Yeah, well,
shake out there, Heather?
I'm not sure we can really answer that in detail for you, Pete.
I think I
And
saw it was this next year, so it's like,
yeah, you'll,
huh? Yeah.
yeah. It's we've got to deal with it, and I don't think we're on the cutting edge of that effort. There's lots of other communities that'll have models that we can go take a look at and see, you know, what works for a big apartment complex, what works for a crowded downtown block with lots of restaurants.
Yeah, because I guess as you get into that, each individual property has its own challenges, so, you know, you can wave the magic wand, or do you try to work with people? Is because we make Glenwood a beautiful place and we love our citizens. So
I'll
anyway,
jump
I'm
in
just-
there just a little bit, and as Heather mentioned, Liz Morrow, who is our landfill director, is pretty amazing at bringing us up to modern times with some of the things at our landfill, composting and diversion of recyclable materials that were previously going into the landfill. And as everyone knows, the city has just gained some recent experience in rolling out a massive trash program that I
Which is
think
nice.
we might have learned some lessons
Which
from.
is really good.
So while we might not have the specifics on exactly how this program is going to roll out in the future, we have learned some lessons. And as mentioned, we had a lot of director and staff input on this program, and it was not thrown out as something that we couldn't do. So if I know city staff and our helpful volunteers that come, we'll get it done.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Dumpsters are different than trash cans. That's all that I'm saying. They make different spaces. Okay, I don't have any other questions. But Commissioner Cowan does.
Staying on the solid waste theme a little bit, seeing that it's the largest chunk of the emissions portfolio for the city, kind of stepping back up to the 30,000 foot view a little bit. Jim, you mentioned some studies are ongoing, or you're looking at some studies, some comparables, and imagine possibly some mitigation measures in there. Can you speak to any of those, even if it's like a vague, this is going on out there, something we're looking at as a municipality to address with our landfill, even if it's, not much meat on that bone?
No.
Okay.
No.
Well, I'm a little sketchy on this too, but I know that there's two things happening. One is that Matt Langhorst and Liz Morrow and their team have already started a waste composition study, which is essentially a methane emissions study of the landfill. It's got different chunks, different cells in it, and trying to, see what's actually being emitted from those piles of 60 plus years of waste. So that's ongoing, and should be finished, I think, by sometime next year or early 26. So that we'll get actual numbers. The numbers that are in the emission figures that are in this plan are based on broad averages from landfills. So we may find out when we finish that actual study of emissions at South Canyon, our numbers could be different, quite a bit different, maybe not very much different. We just don't know. Then meanwhile, the state energy office and the health department, CDPHE, Colorado Public Health and Environment, is doing, this is not a unique problem to Glenwood. There's landfills all over Colorado that are emitting methane. And so the state is working on more of a collaborative statewide, best practices. Let's figure out what all different things we can do to deal with landfills across Colorado.
Okay,
Don't know what the timing is on that or the goals, or I'd like to learn more about it.
Thank you.
One question I have, which you kind of talked about, but just kind of following up on it, is so it sounds like you're still coming up with what data tracker you're going to use, and was that what you said?
Well, we've decided upon a tool that is widely used, ICLEI, They have a tool that's easy to use. We used it for this program and the plan. And then we have an amazing amount of resources within that organization to be able to help us manage it, understand it. I've been involved with 3 different webinars so far, trying to enlighten myself on what it is that I can do in the future to help whoever works on this, whether it's myself and a consultant, to be able to manage it a little bit better. But yeah, we do have a tool that's been used heavily.
Yeah, because I know that's a huge, huge deal. Okay, good. I mean, I think really your implementation plan looks great. So good job. To whomever we're talking to, I don't know whoever's the owner. They're out there somewhere. No, but great job. Thank you, Heather.
Thanks.
Okay. Okay, next on the agenda is design standards discussion. Is everyone good to keep going? Need a break? I'm good. We had nothing to drink, so I think that helped us.
Great, just give me a moment. I'm rejoining as a panelist so I can share from my seat as opposed to standing up.
Let's see, that was the key there.
So small. Okay, that's getting better here. So this is gonna be hard since
I have to hold this down while I talk. So what I'm pulling up for you guys, that's not too bad to see. This discussion is on site design standards that we have. And you guys have been involved in code changes that we've brought to you before that have changed some aspects of how we, as the planning staff, review this and implement regulations. Truly, this is the section of our codes, which is 704080, which is residential site and building design, and its partner 704090, which is non-residential and mixed-use building design. That has a lot to do with aesthetics and the built form that comes into the city of Glenwood Springs. And in our application of any section of municipal code, staff sometimes finds some changing conditions or issues that arise that kind of need some contemplation. So I wanted to bring up these sections of code, go over a few things that we're seeing, and then also be able to take input from you if there's anything you've come across. Because these are the standards that when we bring development before you for recommendation or approval, that staff is holding that developer to. So I'll kind of quickly go down, and I have some areas highlighted to talk about one particular item that is becoming more prevalent, which is a building material type that I want to talk to you guys about. And it's unfortunate that Commissioner Sipperly is not here tonight because I know she would love this. This will be a shorter conversation than anticipated. Residential site and building design, I'll kind of slowly cruise through so no one gets dizzy. This is the applicability and any exceptions, and how we administer it. I will call out, you guys are familiar with our term alternative equivalent compliance. This is the flexibility section of this code, wherein staff has the ability to review an alternative proposal that the developer submits, but it needs to meet the intent to an equal or greater value. So someone needs to prove to community development, well, your regulation states this, but truly technology has changed or building materials have changed so much that now we have this component available and it's better than, it promotes more benefits than what your code states. So we do have that, a little bit of flexibility there that we can apply. So I just wanted to call your attention to that. It's something that we do utilize. So we have your standard dimensional standards, which are looking at your setbacks. Those are fairly standard across the city within specific zone districts. Lot coverage, so how much of your lot you can actually cover with a development. And we have some examples there on 25% or 25% more than what's existing, or 50%. These are some interesting things that people don't always consider that we regulate, how much of your lot you can cover. Surface parking configuration and location, that's always a fun topic, but that's working okay for the moment. Not a topic that I'm bringing up for focus. Refuse containers, since we were just on that, we do have we have regulations on where your refuse containers can go on your property and how they need to be screened. So that is definitely something that we will be looking at for any non-residential program that comes out in the future.
So Hannah, I've got kind of a question that, so do you guys keep track of, and I'm sure you do, because I know you keep track of everything. But it is like variances, we get a lot of variances that come in, and sometimes it seems like we get similar ones, and when it needs to be, maybe it's not a variance, but it needs to be, the code needs to be changed or whatever kind of stuff. How does that roll up into this?
Very, very good point. So yes, when we see a preponderance of variances happening around the same category, we have a tendency to bring it forward as a possible code change if it's something that we can see actually provides a benefit. A lot of times, we'll see similar variances come forward, but it truly has to do with the component of a variance that is, it is unique to
Right.
this lot, this
Exactly, I forgot
condition,
that.
and we don't want to make it available to all scenarios.
Yep.
So there is, some review that happens, but I would say, Commissioner Waller, and I believe you were part of the major code change in 2018. A big component of redoing our entire development code was that previous projects were upwards of 6, 8, 10 variances per development. And so that told staff something is very broken here, that every development coming in had that number of variants that were being requested. And so that was one of the major triggers for our complete redo of the development code. And if you're familiar with what our code looked like before, it was very much needed. Massive change. It was like not the same document at all. So we do try and keep an eye on those and see if do we want to keep this as a variance for unique scenarios, or is this something that needs to be a little bit more broad? So I appreciate you bringing that up. And you can always also point out, like, Hannah, this is the 8th variance we've seen on, I don't know, building color.
Awnings.
Awnings.
What about AI using like technology to help you with some of that?
Yep.
I'm off. Sorry.
I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, using using some sort of data set or something where you can, instead of us kind of realizing after a year of doing this, we're like, oh boy, we've seen like, how many of these variances? We just saw these, but like using artificial intelligence to scan, whatever comes in and is asked for a variance. So you can say, is there a pattern here? I don't know. It was just a thought that flew into my brain.
Commissioner Waller is correct. We track everything. We do have a list
Oh,
of
okay.
every variance we've ever granted.
You're the AI.
I am the AI.
I knew it. I knew you were a
Wah-ha-ha.
robot.
Tell by your eyes how they do it.
But truly, it is something that staff and our staff right now, our planners have been here for quite some time. And so we do tend to see those. But like I said, there are going to be occurrences where we review if a preponderance of the variances coming in are, we write up the staff reports with what is the unique condition here? What is the hardship? And we hope very much that P&Z Commission takes those recommendations and analysis, even if you don't agree with the recommendation, the analysis of what is unique that is being asked.
Yeah.
Because truly, there are things that you don't want to change in code. They will have ramifications, but you want the flexibility for those unique situations where there's a mountain in the middle of the property and you can only build towards the outskirts. So you need a flexibility on the setback when it's feasible. You don't want to change everything just because you're seeing variances, because let's also remember, not saying that developers don't have the best interest in mind, but sometimes what they're going for is not necessarily aligned with what the community wants or needs as far as aesthetics and needs. So we have to balance that.
Yeah.
But I'm being told to watch for the patterns. Okay.
I know, robot.
Watch for the patterns of bad developers.
Watch for the patterns. Watch for the patterns.
You know, there are things with developments that are really a cost analysis. And so that's not something that we necessarily want to make a precedent that we consider. We want good development and we don't want super expensive development, but we also want development that the whole community can get behind and not look at with regret. So let's continue. So I was just pointing out the refuse containers. We have standards for that we look at. So this is getting into the residential building design and character. And we have things like building orientation. So how your building sits on the lot has some stipulations there. So nothing can be sited diagonally. That's a fun one. If you didn't know, you can't just place your house willy-nilly on your lot. And if you've noticed when I'm moving through these, we have a little bit different standards for single family and duplex, and then multifamily. So multifamily, we hold to a little bit higher standard for their development. So you can see some fun images of parking in reference to building orientation. We have a variety of housing types, which you guys, if you recall, were part of that recent code change. So thank you for your efforts there. So that is in full effect. It's more variety of housing types. We have fun pictures that say do this, not this. That one is referring to kind of front facing garages, which we refer to as snout houses. Not a design aesthetic that has worked very well, doesn't flow very well with the community. Four-sided design. So this is also in an attempt to not have very boring blank walls. And we do have some examples of buildings in town that you can probably think about in your head. You're like, huh, that's a really flat, uninteresting wall. So we do have standards to avoid that, which is building articulation. And you can choose from a variety. Also designing architectural features on all sides of your buildings. And we have this long list that depending on if you're single family, you need to meet 3. If you're multifamily, you need to meet 5. This is actually something that we, as staff, when we're reviewing proposals and plans, have to ask the applicant to add. It's something that gets left off quite frequently. So I can confidently say, without these regulations, we would be getting a lot more somewhat bland, flat, long buildings that aren't very aesthetically pleasing for the community. So you've got that whole list there: entry features, windows, door openings, variations in color and height and materials to make the structures that are coming into the city more interesting. So here's the one that actually has spawned this conversation tonight: building materials. Primary materials specifically. So I'm going to read this section. This is: primary building materials shall be selected for their ability to withstand Glenwood Springs variable mountain climate. Just kidding. Materials with demonstrated durability include, but are not limited to, brick, stone, cementitious siding products, wood and log construction, cast concrete, or, love this one, other comparable materials as approved by the director. That is me. So you can see number 2 there, another stipulation: exterior insulation and finish systems, EIFS, shall not be utilized in high traffic areas such as at primary building entrances where it may be easily damaged.
Explain what EIFS.
Yeah, what is that?
So this is stucco, but EIFS is the synthetic version
Yeah,
of
then
stucco.
there's natural.
Right, natural stucco and EIFS. What we as staff are experiencing a lot of: stucco or EIFS is on the rise as a preferred building material because it is cost effective. And so naturally, I can surmise, as you see things change in our economy, people look to have more affordable options for their building materials, and we're seeing an uptick in applications for stucco. What people, as the public, don't often realize is that you need a permit to stucco your building. And or put siding up on your building. That's a permit through our building department for anyone listening out there in the world. Doing my education part. And what we're seeing is we're getting a lot of people that come in afterwards, realizing once our building department has had a friendly conversation with them, to come in and get a stucco permit, and it's not an approved primary building material unless it comes under other comparable materials as approved by the director. I am not an architect. I am not a developer, though I sometimes play one on TV. And so what I'm looking for tonight, we're seeing an uptick in these applications. And I'm looking for insight from you guys if this is something that we need to formalize more. We have this stipulation that EFS specifically should not be utilized in high traffic areas. And so what we've been enforcing upon that is allowing stucco in certain areas, but not around primary entrances, which is not necessarily received with the most enthusiastic response from the applicant. Is, you know, if they want to do their entire building and we say, you can't have it here, that's, can be met with some frustration, which is expected. So kind of wanted to have a conversation with you guys, general feelings on stucco, experience with it. This is why Commissioner Sipperly would probably be adamant one way or the other, but I'll bring her up to speed later. You
You're
can
not
play.
feeling the vibe. Yeah.
So I guess I'll throw it out and see initial thoughts. Some that staff has had is this something that goes towards a neighborhood character? If every building, every home in a neighborhood were stucco, would that change the feel? Is that an acceptable aesthetic? Or is it more acceptable in other areas? I will say, in our commercial, so our non-residential design standards, stucco is allowed. It is a listed building material. So that's in 70-40-90. And so I'm toying as the director who gets to make some of these comparable materials decisions. Is this something that needs to change? Has technology for stucco or EFS advanced enough that the concerns that are included in our code now may not be the concerns at present? And then kind of how people feel about aesthetically speaking. Is it appropriate in one neighborhood over the other, and general feelings?
I know somebody who just did stucco.
Please don't mention their address.
I'm not. But I don't know if it was traditional stucco or if it's,
What is?
EFS.
Can you explain?
Yeah,
EFS?
and by that, are you saying like by the front door would be, okay.
Commissioner Waller.
EFS, so there,
Oh, yeah, he should know.
the natural stucco is more, and I used to live in New Mexico too.
Okay, good.
So I lived in Albuquerque, so we had, everything was stucco. Was all natural stucco. So we'd put up chicken wire and that sort of thing, and then you would put up kind of like it's a stucco, but it's kind of like a cementous product that you put on. And EFS, I mean, it's you, and any of it, you have like a drain mat behind it, but the EFS is more like a foam. And you can probably speak at this as well, but it's a synthetic. So versus the natural, and I think the natural, and John, maybe you know this too, I think it even breathes some, is what it does. And where we would have trouble, where it fail a lot, would be at the parapets. Parapets would be typically where you'd fail. And so you'd have to do caps and that sort of thing. But, it's totally different there because you're just going for Santa Fe style and all that sort of thing. But
When you say foam, it's a foam and then there's. a
yeah,
product
yeah,
spread on top of it?
and then there's stuff, there's and I think it might be like a mesh kind of thing. It's not like, I mean, I recently saw one in my neighborhood, which I won't mention the name, but you might even know the name. But anyway, I mean,
So-
that's kind of thing. I mean,
Artificial intelligence tells me
well, but I mean,
that stucco is a hard-coated, fine-grained cement,
yeah.
while EFS, synthetic stucco, consists of multiple layers, including insulation boards.
Right.
Stucco is sturdier and more durable, lasting longer with proper maintenance. EFS requires certified installers, while stucco is easier to install. I'll leave that up to
Well,
Commissioner Wallers. And both look similar, but EFS is synthetic and can be applied to large areas without control joints, I think what you just mentioned.
correct.
EFS installation and repair is more expensive than stucco, which I'm not sure that that one is.
Well,
still relevant.
you know, I'll speak out a little bit. My son happens to be moving to Rockland. And I just did an inspection of his house and go through everything. The whole house is EFS and it's, and you know, it gets hammered by the sun, hammered by the weather where it is. It's, you know, 20 years old. It's in great shape. There's no cracks. There's nothing on it. And it's 100%, you know?
Wow.
So, I mean, I'm not really, you know, to me, 100% of anything is like, you know, if it's all stone, we don't live in like, you know, I don't know, the forest in Germany or something, you know, or something, you know, there's a mix of textures that we have. I mean, to me, it should be an approved substance, and I don't even care if it's by the door, if it looks good, I mean, and maybe that's, you know, if you have a good architect that comes in, they're gonna have something that says, this looks good. I know when I built my house 25 years ago, we have a little bit of stucco in certain spots. In fact, up near the front, but there's a wainscot in the front with stone, and you know, there's all this other stuff that's mixed with it. So I think saying it shouldn't be at the front, I think that's someone that was been drinking or snorting EFS or something.
EFS.
But I mean, I think saying no for anything to me seems like the wrong thing. And I do think though, you know, it could be the director's opinion, but I think it should be an approved, that's my own opinion, that it should be an approved substance or material, and you know, everything needs to be done in good taste of whatever it is that you're doing. I mean, it's like you have lap siding, you have, or, you know, however you do a thing. I mean, it's the buildings that you look at that's all one bland side. You're looking for a change in, anyway, that's my own opinion on it. Who's up here? Are you off? Okay, Amy.
Well, I was just gonna say, I don't know. I've hardly ever seen a stucco house, so I have no real opinion, but I mean, I kind of agree with what you're saying, Peter. I mean, if something's done in good taste, I think there actually might be one up in my neighborhood now that I'm thinking about it, and they just had to redo the whole thing, actually. I'm not saying where I live nor my address, but it doesn't stick out like a sore thumb or anything. Everything else is like wood stick, you know what I mean? And you walk by that house and it's not like, oh my gosh. So, and they colored it too. So I think there was some color.
That's the
added
other
to
thing
it.
with EFS, you can paint it.
It was kind of
So
cool.
with natural,
Yeah.
you have to coat it with it's a different kind of coating on it.
Yeah, I
If you
don't
wanna
know that much
change
about
the
it.
color, or it goes out, but
Is it less or more fire resistant? Does anybody know? Like, what is I mean, I
well,
don't know.
EFS probably adds a little more insulation. It's like
Nope, somebody down there knows.
It's like a zip
Not right
system. Commissioner Cowan.
Yeah, and this is probably gonna feed into it, but I was just thinking like R value benefit of those exterior applications. Just a question there.
Yeah,
Part of
it's
this
like a thermal
discussion.
break.
Hannah, where did that piece of the code come from and how long has it been in code?
It predates me.
Predates you.
I can't necessarily speak to like where every aspect of that code came from. I'd have to go back and check to see if it predated the 2018 code change, because some of our standards were brought forward,
So,
but I can't actually attribute
understood.
intent or where
It
came
would have
from.
been, it probably would have originated with some sort of international or national design standards or something along those lines. And it could be 30 years ago and the technology's improved or whatever. And that's why you're asking based on your other things, technology improves. And it's a living and breathing document, the code is. So I personally think based on what I've seen, that shouldn't be a disallowed. I wouldn't disallow EFS.
Yeah, and just, I guess, addressing the national or body or whatever that it's allowed in the building code. And I don't see a good reason, I guess, not to allow it in our land use code or our development code. Um, there's specific things that they have to do, just like any other part of the building code, but those typically represent best practices, and there's an ASTM standard it has to meet. So that may address the fire rating. I don't know what the standard is, but yeah, I don't see a compelling reason to leave it out.
So just from like a question standpoint, what, so you're seeing a lot more of these, but like what concerns you the most about it? Is it just because you feel like staff, I mean, because you must get other like citing permits and things like that, right? So what's so different, I guess, is my question. Cause I don't really know that much about this, but.
It's not necessarily what's so different. It's the
Yeah.
fact that our code states that we are meant as staff. Again,
I
this
see.
is staff's Bible. This
Okay,
is what we are held to. We have to, you guys get to deviate. We don't.
okay.
This is the code that we have to implement. So if it says that,
Mhm.
that's what I'm implementing. And why I'm bringing it to you tonight is to get some feedback as we're seeing something that changes. And that's when we implement code amendments. One of the criteria, if you recall, when we bring any code amendment to you guys is something in the community has changed, or the environment has changed. Something has changed, and so we need an update because code is a living document. And if we still had the building standards from 50 years ago, we wouldn't be doing very well. So this is just something, given this night is informational update, I wanted to get some thoughts, and you definitely have provided it. So it's not that anything is different. It's that currently I'm not allowed to just hand that out the door on a building permit.
I see. Okay, so maybe if it wasn't there and there was more, then people, do they still need to ask for it? Like if that wasn't there and somebody wanted to do whatever that material is called and the stucco, I can remember that. Do they have to come and get a permit? Even if it's like, say it's siding, or let's say it's stucco?
This is a great educational moment, and I am so glad that you asked,
Oh.
because you guys are out in the community and
Maybe
you're
I am
very knowledgeable about
channeling
code.
Carolyn.
This is absolutely something, whether it's allowed in this design standard or not, requires a permit with our building department. If you want to put siding or do stucco or ephes or change your building exterior, it needs a building permit with community development. And so I would encourage you guys to share that information far and wide. Because we try and make sure that we're educating the public on what they need to do. A lot of people don't know. These are regulations that we obviously work in every day. You guys get exposed to it here and hear about it, but average public resident doesn't necessarily know that they need a permit to do stucco. And it is unfortunate when how they find out is when our staff is out in the community and they see contractors applying stucco to a house that doesn't have a permit, because then things halt and they need to come in and get the permit, and it can slow things down. Time is money. That is not our preferred method to educate someone that it requires a permit. So if you want to help out the community development department and you have friends that are looking at their house like, what should I do? Your answer should be, well, whatever it is, go get a permit from your friendly planners and building official at the city.
Okay.
So this is a discussion. I wanted to get your feedback. You guys have given me great feedback, and I think we'll take it back and probably consult some architects and things to get some opinions on, building practices and what's come out in its application. But wanted to get kind of a consensus and then use it as an opportunity to kind of highlight some of our design standards that we apply every day.
I guess one question I would have, looking at the verbiage again, was so it seems like whatever you do, it's a mix of materials or patterns or whatever. And it seems the word mix needs to be a key word that's in there. I mean, if the whole house is cast concrete, that's not good. You know, if the whole house is well, I mean, if you're on Polo Road, that's, you know, the houses are all brick but I mean, anyway, I mean, I think that it seems like most architects that I work with, you want a mix of, you want things that it's more interesting, which is your don't do your picture
Yeah,
kind of
and then
thing. It's
before, kind of, you, like a side porch and door.
Yeah, yeah, so I think what you're referring to is the accent materials aspect in item B there. This is the creative use of accent building materials to provide a variety and visual interest is encouraged. So that's an interesting language in code because it's not a regulation.
Mhm.
We can encourage. I can encourage all day long. And I do, yeah. For visual
But you can't
variety.
take them down.
But that one's not a strict regulation. So it's good to point out that that is definitely what we encourage. It makes more vibrant buildings. I think you guys can all think of buildings that walking by, you find more visually appealing than some others.
Commissioner John.
Yeah, just to add on to that, it's also one of the architectural features they can use in their four-sided design. So it's probably one of the easier ones to achieve.
Absolutely. When people submit a plan, let's say for a single family house, you're meant to do 3 architectural features on each side of your building. And if you're missing one, if your one side of your building is all stucco, one color, and staff will come back and say, you need to have 3 features. But some very simple ones to do is a change in color or a change in material. So if you had stucco, then you provide the wainscoting on the bottom for something that visually breaks it up. So while we strongly encourage it, we have a limit, a threshold that you need to meet. And we encourage beyond that for fun building types within the city.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, that's what I thought this would be a great opportunity for. We can all learn stuff together. So thank you for that. That was one of the main topics that I wanted to bring up tonight. We'll just kind of go through, and if you guys have any questions on some of these
What about the
topics.
color white? Are we
The
gonna-
color
did
white.
you-
So
did you
funny
make
that the
that
next
yellow?
thing. So one of the items that staff does deal with often is building colors. So you can see here, this is our residential design standards. And so we have regulations around the predominant exterior colors of multifamily buildings shall be earth tones. To minimize impact, darker accent colors shall be utilized on garage door surfaces. White or other highly reflective colors are prohibited. So if that wasn't something that you realized is in our code, we do not allow multifamily buildings to come in as bright white unless otherwise approved by the approving body. No, not
But
me.
this is multifamily, not,
This is
I mean,
multifamily.
so I'm talking about single family.
Yes,
Is white in single family too?
it is not strictly prohibited unless you are in the downtown core.
Okay. Okay, that was good.
So again, this is an interesting one. You might have looked at the several multifamily buildings going in around town and wondered, about the color. So we would indicate to an applicant if they came in with a bright white building that is prohibited. I don't have the authority to change prohibited items. That is limited to the higher commissions and city council to,
That's not a subjective word.
yeah, it's not subjective. It's not encouraging, prohibited. And then, so outside of the white or highly reflective colors, we have bright or highly reflective metal finishes shall be limited to accent materials. So that's, preventing like an entire wall of a multifamily residential building from being metal. We do encourage it because it can be quite creative in its application of an architectural feature as an accent. But currently you can't usually we think of an accent as less than 30% of an elevation.
So do you need a permit to paint your house?
Interesting question. Sometimes.
I
It's
mean,
not
not
necessarily
if
a
you're painting
permit.
white.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're doing some color thing that's against the city code, but I mean, a lot of times you have an HOA, but you don't have an HOA that monitors that, or, like maybe Glenwood Park, there's places where they're not active HOAs, so. But anyway, I know for siding, roofing, that kind of thing, but.
Yeah,
So an interesting question.
it is
So that's not
interesting.
like a good answer.
it's not a permit. You don't need a permit to paint your house, but if you're certainly a multifamily building, if we saw someone painting a multifamily apartment complex bright white, I'm pretty sure that staff would show up in short order to educate and inform that they
Okay.
might need to choose another color. Certainly, we deal with that more easily when we have applications that are coming in. If we have, we require a materials board that you guys see in the development submittal materials. And if they have that, then we point it out to them, like, you're gonna need to choose a different paint color than that. But it is something that a lot of people don't know about that is a regulation, because it's one of those things you're like, really? That the color? Yeah. Most of these other things are pretty straightforward. We've got height transitions that apply with specific settings. If you're next to a single story home and you want to put up 3 stories, we're going to require you to do some creative architectural design so that your impact is lessened on that neighbor. So this talks about massing and form of how you can do that, and has, again, beautiful pictures. We do regulate garages as well, storage also. More pictures, this, not this, to try and get people to see. And eventually when we're talking about living documents, some of these pictures might need to be updated as architectural features and trends do tend to change over time. So I'm looking at these and like, yeah, that's from a while ago, but.
So I'm gonna throw out this question.
Yes.
Do it later, but one conflict is that, we just saw a presentation on affordable housing. And I can think of some projects that I've done where, development code says you have to do this, you have to do that, and if you're the person building that, all of that costs you more money. So, when I heard you reading through that code, you said, equivalency subjective to the planning director, and, I've had things with code where I work with the building official and they go, okay, you're meeting the intent, so I'm good with that, kind of, so it's an interesting thing as we're trying to drive affordability down, yet we make everything cutesy and more beautiful, and which equates to money. I mean, it just plain old doesn't. And I'm not saying I want to see the big nose or whatever, you call that thing, but I mean, you know what I mean? No, that's a tough-
Absolutely, and I appreciate you pointing that out. I think a lot of our application of code with staff is a balance of goals of the city. We've got we have a lot of goals that are competing. We want really nice looking development, but also we want it to be affordable. And those, as you guys all know, you want it fast, cheap, or done well. You only get to choose one. So we certainly look at that and that flexibility of someone being able to come in, and all of our sections of code, if you guys are reading this for your leisurely activities before bedtime, all of our sections of code have an intent section that talks about, we're adopting these standards for the following reasons. And so that's what we're looking at when someone comes in with alternative equivalent compliance. Show me how you're meeting the intent of this section differently than how we have it regulated. So that is an option that we do have coming in. And then also in sections of our code with the affordable housing in mind, we do allow for some exceptions for truly deep affordable housing. With LIHTC projects, they get a little bit more flexibility on some of the standards.
I mean, it almost seems to me like, the way you have this document written is you have intent, and it goes through and lists like the goals. And it seems like in the intent, it should be, we want aesthetic buildings, but we also want cost-effective buildings. And, even though that could be conflicting goals, I mean, tough patooties. I mean, you have to figure that out and design for that the best you can. And that's where I think maybe you let in an EFS, or, people figure out what materials kind of work for them and how they do their massings and all of that sort of thing. But I think this document should have the housing comments in there that talks about affordability. Cause that's, you know, the town votes again, I think it's a huge deal. Anyway, that's all my thing was.
See. So I don't have too much.
more to go through with this. Just kind of a refresher for you guys and seeing, what things you wanted to comment on. Covering the garage, storage space, that's a requirement, standard, since we all need 3 mountain bikes and 2 kayaks. It's important in our mountain town character to have that. It's in my car all the time.
That's the intent of our. That's what our town.
Yes. So also, again, we have some fun roofing. So we have roofing standards for the type of roof that you can put in. Yes.
I had previously commented on this. What's the intent of, well, it's on page 15, requirement for multifamily dwellings in downtown core shall have the appearance of being a single family dwelling.
Good call out on a standard. So that is specifically, we have additional downtown core design standards, and that's in recognition that the downtown core as a neighborhood has a lot of character and history built in. So that's in a nod to some of that. Even though we don't have a historical district, we recognize that there's a lot of history in the downtown that comes with character. Looking like a single family home, I think it goes on further talking about the historic kind of Victorian architecture that we see a lot of downtown. So that's, I can't always speak to the intent. I wish I created this code like God, but that's what we believe in that one. So a little bit extra on the downtown core to preserve neighborhood character. I know when we were doing the comprehensive plan update, we talked a lot about small town character that we wanted to move away from. But truly, some neighborhoods really do have a distinct character. Downtown core is one that's been recognized. And so getting to that of wanting multifamily buildings to blend in a little bit more with that character and having them look like a single family residence, which we actually have some great examples downtown of multifamily buildings where you're like, really, that's 8 units? It just looks like a really big single family home. Did that answer kind of?
Yeah, it seems a little broad to me. Like I can think of at least one building that is historic that does not look like a single family home and is a multifamily building. I think it potentially limits some parcels. I think that, could, well, yeah, I guess it limits some parcels, especially downtown, right? I think like the, I think in the improvement zone, what is the,
General Improvement District?
yes, the GID specifically, I think maybe needs an exemption from that, or maybe not exemption, an exception, variance. I think that could warrant. That's all.
I mean, to me, it seems like single family is too strong a verbiage but I don't know what, anyway, it's not worth kind of beating that horse, but
Sorry,
Okay.
I was just reading the supplemental design standards section that I have up here. For the purposes of evaluating surrounding neighborhood context. So there's also some standards where we look at what's happening on a block face for something that's coming in. And then I'm trying to find that section where it refers to that, but any other, the non-residential standards kind of close out with those additional characteristics we have for the downtown core, which mainly focus on design and roof structure. And then we get into non-residential and mixed-use site and building design, which so for residential purposes and non-residential purposes, those design characteristics alter slightly. We don't have too much showing up on the commercial side where we're seeing something that's changing. So I don't have many comments for that section, but wanted to get your feedback on some of these things, allow you to kind of see this when you're not applying it to a specific development, to see what we take every proposal through and give you guys an opportunity to kind of comment. So I appreciate your comments, and that's it's actually all I have for you on this item. It's not an action item.
John.
I have one more comment.
Well-
Now we know.
Well, we have some more comments, I'm sure.
I'll keep it brief, but and I'm sure I'm in the minority here, but I think sod articulation could merit a revisit. I think it's increases cost and there are better ways to break up massing or to achieve our goals of less massive buildings. I guess I'll leave it at that. It's less climate adaptive, it's more expensive. There are a lot of negatives to facade articulation I think aren't necessarily considered.
Could you provide some examples to that comment?
Well, there's embodied carbon is higher. Facade articulation, there's more waste generated with facade articulation. Things like air sealing details are much more difficult when you have more corners. You know, it's by the time you get to building it, you're 3 years from when you drew it, but
Not in my community.
yeah, that's all.
My question is, it's, more on, implementation of it. So, you know, let's say I'm a homeowner, you know, and I want to build a house. I want to tear a trailer down and put a house up on Palmer Road or something. Good for you. Yeah, good for me. And, you know, but I'm just a regular homeowner. So I look at this and it's like, holy shit, you know, it's like a quagmire. Yeah, she can beat me. But I mean, and so I guess what I'm kind of getting at, and I think I read in there somewhere where you talked about levels of development. There was like less than or equal to 4, greater than or equal to 25, greater than or equal to 40, greater than or equal to 80. There were some different things, and I guess the other thing I'll kind of throw in here is infill. And since ballot A got approved, you know, basically we're not gonna approve anything anymore, you know, from that perspective. I mean, you know, if it's 4 or less, you know, it's administrative. If it's greater than 4, we'll see it, but it goes to city council. So it seems to me like if it's 4 or less, I wouldn't use, those aren't developers, those are homeowners, or they're small little builders. And how do you make the process be as friendly as possible to those people? And maybe there's another thing you have that's a checklist that, you know, let's say I'm gonna build this house and blah, 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 that how do I get that through quick? And you know, it's not quick because you're building it yourself. You're not have probably a lot of subs and all that sort of thing, but I don't know if that's making sense what I'm saying. I mean, it almost seems like there's level of ease and levels of burden, cost burden that you put on people. I mean, if you're the 4 or less, seems like you want less cost burden on those people as, you know, minimal. And if you're greater than 80, you know, then you burden them a lot. All right, but and then it's some sort of gradient in between there of how that goes. And I don't know if that makes sense what I'm saying, but
You know, and we do have some aspects of code that you pointed out that are getting to that standards that apply when you hit a certain threshold. And yes, building your own home is a process and an endeavor that is a lot of work, and not everyone is going to know all the standards. And, you know, the building department and the planning department within our capacity do try to help builders understand some of these components and hold their hand a little bit more than someone who's coming in with a professional architect and a professional engineer and civil designer and those aspects.
right. And I guess one thing, and I'll just kind of throw this out there. I mean, we have a lot of what word do I want to use here? Redundancy or bureaucracy that's in place for larger projects, and probably rightfully so. And so do you have do you reduce that for the small ones and go back to the old days of But you know, you know what I mean? That there's, that there's, you know, fewer things, you don't have to go through as many engineering you know, blah, 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 all of those sorts of things. So as projects get more complex, you need that, more oversight as you go through it. And I think that's kind of what I'm getting at, because otherwise you throw that cost burden down onto the person that's building, and I'm kind of going at the 4 or less. Those are just mom and pop builders or kind of people. So anyway, that was my last thing I had. Anyone else have anything else? Do you have anything? Okay. Okay, where are we? Do you have anything else, Hannah?
I
Other
will
than-
prepare your comments, but-
Okay, so commissioner comments. Right? John?
I was just gonna say that, very informative meeting. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. A lot of stuff you guys gave us today.
I gave it a thumbs up.
And I'd echo that too. I thought that this was, you know, it was good. It was. Okay, Hannah?
Yeah, I was very glad that we had the time to take to do this, and we'll look to fill other meetings that don't have a lot of applications. Keeping you up to date, because you guys have an impact on these things, so keeping you as informed as possible on what the city is doing is important. So thanks for sitting and listening and offering suggestions. From me tonight, one thing I did want to mention, which is very applicable to what we're talking about tonight, the Community Development Department is in the process of implementing a new permitting and licensing system. It is a massive change on how we do things. It is a 12-month process to program and implement. And it's going to be amazing. I'm going to say that. It's going to be amazing. And it truly is. There's a quote me. It's taking a lot of work on ComDev. And so we are committing an insane amount of staff hours currently. We meet as an entire department at least 1.5 to 2 days a week where we are not able to do other things. And we are strictly working on programming this system so that it works well when we are hoping to go live in February of 2025. The main components of this system, what it's going to be, is kind of revolutionizing how you apply for a building permit or a planning permit through the city of Glenwood Springs. It's going to an all online component where you will be able as the applicant to track where it is at in the approval process and see how far it has been completed and have a lot more transparency in what actually happens after you submit a building permit to our department. Currently, we try to handle those questions of where's my permit at, or how's it going, or what's the holdup. We handle that through emails and phone calls, and it takes up a considerable amount of our time because we're actively reviewing projects, and we do have to take the time out to answer those questions, which we do. But this is going to be a much smoother process with that and make it a lot easier for the applicant to know that they've submitted a complete application. Because that's an issue we have where people submit half the information required, and then we spend the next 6 months trying to get the rest. And they wonder, why is this taking so long? So now you'll be able to submit and it will say, congratulations, you can submit your application because you've included all the documents that are requested, but you won't get to that point unless you have it all. So a little bit more transparency and hopefully some understanding on how the process works, so it's not so confusing for the smaller developers, which we see that more with contractors and things of that nature. So we are 7 months into our 12-month process. And for example, this week, my staff has been in programming all 4 days. We've got 2 full days tomorrow and Thursday, and we've had half days today and yesterday. So it's a monumental amount of our time, and we're asking for patience with the rest of City Hall, as well as patience with the community as our process slows down in the meantime, while we're taking time to do that. But it's very important, and we're excited come February. It's through Tyler, and it's called EP&L, Permitting and Licensing Software. Other jurisdictions utilize this, and we utilize Tyler for a couple of other programs for our utilities and finance area. So it's a It's a rollout that has been intended for the last 4 years. But COVID put a very large kink in the rollout of departments that are onboarding into the software. So it's our turn and we're working very hard and we're excited to see the end product, but it's going to take some sweat and tears in the meantime. But as a part of that rollout, we'll give you guys kind of an update because we will need champions in the community to spread that awareness of how it's going to work, because it'll be a learning curve for staff as well as applicants. But exciting news in what's coming out of our department. I think I mentioned we're also currently down a staff member. So our community development technician, I'm not sure you guys ever met Tammy, but she was here and then she was gone. So story of my life.
It's like a song.
It does. A country song, yes. I lost my dog as well.
Got run over by a train.
So we have been actively interviewing for that position and hope to be hiring it again. So we're also a little, we're missing our organizing piece. So hopefully I'll have a staffing update for you at the next meeting. I can never seem to stay fully staffed. It's like 3 seconds and then, I'm actually not quite sure on October P and Z applications. Things are kind of shifting, so I don't have a list for you guys today, but we likely will hold a meeting. And that's all I have for you.
Well, this was good, I know. We said that. So, using this to educate us. It's always a good thing.
And as always, if you guys have specific topics that you want discussed, and I track things such as lighting regulations, I keep these in the back of my minds when you guys say things for review. It doesn't go unheard. I'm keeping a list.
One that I missed at a meeting was the evacuation, the city evacuation thing. And, not that that has a lot to do with us probably, but, well, no, it probably does. Because when developments come in, like the West Glenwood project, that was a huge conversation of, how do you get people the heck out of here if something happens?
Yeah, I did want, I invited someone from engineering because a important update was given to council on infrastructure projects kind of happening around town. Unfortunately, Ryan Gordon wasn't available tonight, so I might try and sneak him in elsewhere because I am trying to get you guys as much information as council gets on things that you make decisions on or weigh in on. So hopefully that's a TBD that he'll be on one of the next agendas.
Greg. I guess on that, just something I'm thinking about is I've been going around town a little bit and to get an overview of what triggers, so a commercial development that triggers curb and gutter sidewalk design and implementation as part of that development approval. To understand kind of what that threshold is when that trigger happens, and then what design standards are used, in the city for that. So an example, I guess, that I'm looking at is over off Melray, the funkiness of that kind of quilt of jurisdictions there with county and city. But when DAB went in, they had to, kind of redo the curb and gutter and sidewalk. And I imagine that was probably at that time, the expected design standard for the sidewalk. But then it terminates, right? Because that's it. So I guess if we're going to have a future educational thing, just something maybe to think about is a presentation on what that standard is and how applicable it is. Is it across the board, all within the city, or is it kind of piecemeal by development or neighborhood? Please. Thanks.
It's like another country song. The little sidewalks to nowhere that someday they're to somewhere.
Yeah.
No, that's what,
That's right.
I built a lot of the sidewalks to nowhere.
Okay.
I'm just saying. One day they'll be connected.
Yeah, one day.
Yeah, because it is very orphaned right now.
Right, yeah. So Dab, that's the podcast station.
We'll see how long it's going to be there.
Yeah, outside of an update, which I think having Matt Langhorst, our Public Works Director, come and talk about some of these larger aspects that they mandate for development. I will say, the city in our regulations has the right to enforce sidewalks, curb and gutter with any new development. Some streets in our city are designated as subpar for right-of-way width, and so we recognize putting in a sidewalk on those specific streets is not feasible, so we have some waivers. But truly, we try and capture sidewalks with every development. Even an ADU can trigger a sidewalk if a sidewalk doesn't exist. So, and that's the effort of like filling in the patchwork of some of those areas that when they come in lead to nowhere. But eventually, as the property next to them and the property next to them redevelop or develop, that sidewalk fills in. So it is the opportunity.
That your great grandkid will be able to
It's like I believe it's
go out from Defiance to get some weeds down at there.
a Chinese proverb of, the person who plants the tree doesn't enjoy the shade.
Right, exactly.
It's a process and lengthy, and sometimes it doesn't quite make sense in the moment, but it can be slow of getting those pieces. But truly, we have an example of an establishment in town quite a long ways ago that made that same argument. Well, why are you requiring us to put in a sidewalk? It's only 25 feet long on the frontage and it doesn't connect to anything. And 10 years later, it connects to everything and is a vital piece of our pedestrian infrastructure. So we got to do it, even though sometimes it's painful. But yes, I love these ideas for updates to you guys.
Yeah, I guess just. Yeah, I guess as part of where I'm going with that is if we are looking at kind of that extended length of time, what's being done to ensure continuity in design, features and aesthetic, as if I'm looking at 10 years down the road from when DAB did their thing, is there going to be some of that?
We're
shared
going to
element?
require you to have hovercrafts. So
Cool. Nice.
Okay, I think we're done.
I told you, I ain't coming, they missed a good one.